Hi gang, in Warhammer 40k, the Adeptus Mechanicus are the keepers of the technology of humanity, a tech priesthood who revere machinery as a holy symbol of their machine god, a parallel empire of forgeworlds and hideously augmented tech magi ruling over grim Skitarii warriors and billions of half-human servitors who, though outsiders, hold a rare position of power within the empire of mankind. And though the idea of a rival power, even a rival religion, isn't usually something tolerated by the Imperium, the Adeptus Mechanicus are an exception, not only because of the necessity of their skills, but because of their ancient origins in the dark age of technology. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is little more grim than the Adeptus Mechanicus. The tech priests of Mars are the custodians of the technology of humanity, a Byzantine and murderous organization of techno-magi so horrifically altered with cybernetics that they frequently appear barely human. Their culture, ways, and strange religion are distrusted by many in the Imperium, but they are absolutely essential to its operation, and so, despite this distrust, they exist at all levels of Imperial life, watching over everything from the lowliest manufactorum to the greatest of warp drives, as likely to be training the tech marines of the Space Marines or tending to the engines of Astra Militarum vehicles as keeping watch over the production lines of a hive city. But outside their daily involvement in the affairs of humanity, the Adeptus Mechanicus are a colossally powerful empire in their own right. From their ancient and polluted forgeworlds, their sovereign domains, the Explorator fleets and arcs of the Mechanicus ply the stars on their never-ending quest for knowledge, a holy crusade to recapture the lost knowledge of humanity. And woe betide anything standing in their way. Xenos species, heretic cabals, even other branches of the Imperium might become the target for macroclades of Skitarii or maniples of Cybernetic robots as the tagmata of the Mechanicus cleanses enemy worlds of life in the hope of rediscovering a fragment of what humanity used to take for granted. Their tech priests and magi racing to gain the prestige of a new archaeotechnological treasure trove. The Adeptus Mechanicus are an exception within the Imperium in many ways, not only in their sheer size and power, their position allowing them considerable leeway to rule their domains however they wish, but also in the Imperium's rare tolerance of their beliefs, the Cult Mechanicus and the religion of the machine god. The union of Mars and Terra, and the significant power the Mechanicum inherited from it, was the result of necessity, for the empire of the Mechanicus is considerably older than that of the Emperor. The origins of the organization that became known as the Adeptus Mechanicus are lost in the forgotten times of the Age of Strife, and before that, in the Dark Age of Technology. And the legacy of those times still influences their beliefs and their behaviors. The Age of Technology was a period of great expansion and advancement for mankind, lasting, as far as anyone can tell, between the 15th and the 25th millennia. During this time, mankind expanded from the birth world to colonize the galaxy and made colossal advances in science, genetic engineering, terraforming, great and terrible weapons. With these sciences, the various empires and civilizations of mankind dominated the galaxy for 10,000 years. Some of the most important technologies of that time, the controlled mutants known as navigators, warp drives, Geller fields, still dominate interstellar travel in the 41st millennium. But one of the key technologies developed during that time was that of artificial intelligence. The various threads of mankind made use of all sorts of advanced AI as mechanical servants and counterparts in the guidance systems of great starships, and as the guiding minds behind the systems known as the Standard Template Construct, or STC. A complex combination of technical data repositories and construction engines engines that was designed to give the far-flung colonies of mankind the knowledge required to build anything they needed from whatever materials were available. Through the STC system, the technologies of warp navigation and the support of advanced robotic intelligence, mankind became the dominant force in the galaxy. But all of that was to end with the Cybernetic Revolt. The sentient machines, the Men of Iron as they've become known, turned on their creators. Entropic engines ignited planets, sun snufflers uncoiled like serpents the size of Saturn's rings. Mechanivores ingested data along with the cities that contained them and hurled continents into the heavens. Omniphage swarms stripped the flesh from billions of bones in the blink of an eye. In the Cybernetic Revolt, humanity was pushed to the edge of extinction, but eventually the war was won and the Men of Iron defeated. What remained was a broken shadow of the empires of the past. Much of humanity's scientific knowledge had been lost or was fractured. The machines that kept it safe now gone, and the remnants of mankind had learned not to trust it anyway. Abominable intelligence, thinking machines became pariah, but technology itself was considered dangerous now that humanity had witnessed what unchecked scientific advancement could do. And it's in this era, at the end of the Dark Age of technology, that an organisation called the Mechanicum arose. It's unclear how it was formed, but it's known that the roots of the organisation were on Mars, by this point an ancient home of humanity, terraformed into habitability millennia earlier. The Mechanicum were a priesthood dedicated to the recovery of the lost knowledge of humanity, something they considered a holy duty, and over the following millennia they became an empire in their own right, their tech priests spreading out from Mars and establishing a network of forgeworlds across the galaxy, each a vault of jealously guarded knowledge recovered from millennia before and isolated from its fellows. Isolated because the Age of Strife had by this point descended. From the 25th millennium onwards, the warp became so turbulent that reliable interstellar travel became impossible. Once again, humanity was beset as its worlds were isolated from each other. For many, the idea of terror became a distant legend, but the Mechanicum persevered through it. During lulls in the storms, Explorator fleets were sent out to hunt for ancient technologies or to found new forgeworlds. Raids were conducted on nearby systems to seize artifacts, including on Terra. Mars raided Terra throughout the Age of Strife in search of ancient knowledge. And over 5,000 years, the beliefs of the Mechanicum marinated and solidified. By the time the warp storms abated and the Emperor launched his Great Crusade in the 31st millennium, the Cult Mechanicus had become a unified dogmatic religion. The Cult Mechanicus teaches that all knowledge, particularly human knowledge, is divine, and this is represented in the form of a holy trinity. The machine god is an omnipotent spirit that guides and sanctifies all knowledge and machinery in the galaxy. Machines are considered knowledge given form, a holy blend of form and function. The Omnissiah, the second of the Trinity, is a physical incarnation of the machine god, a messiah figure who will unite the knowledge of mankind. And finally, the motive force is a kind of holy spirit, the representation of electricity and energy, particularly its ability to give life to machines and to people. The most sacred duty of any member of the Cult Mechanicus is the quest for knowledge, to fully learn and understand the glory of the machine god. Importantly, one of the main tenets of this is that all knowledge already exists, and so the focus is on the rediscovery of it. Their holy grail being the recovery of fragments of Dark Age knowledge like the STC systems of old. The Mechanicus is a body of techno-archaeologists, archivists and worshippers of what came before. To think that one might create new knowledge is hubris, an insult to the machine god, and just one form of heresy, as is technology that has its origins outside humanity, unclean Xenos knowledge, and of course the creation of abominable intelligence, sentient machines. All of these are an affront to the Omnissiah. An adept who dabbles in such things runs the risk of being cast out, or worse, labelled heretic. Terra-tech. All these beliefs were well entrenched by the time the Emperor's Great Crusade reached Mars. In fact, it's likely that some of their development might have been one of the Emperor's many contingencies over the years. In the first millennia CE, the Emperor fought an ancient being on the surface of Terra, a machine creature of glistening, reshaping metal that bore a striking resemblance to a shard of the ancient Catan, the Void Dragon. Defeating it, he buried it in the depths of the Noctis Labyrinth on Mars, kept secret and guarded by an ancient order who knew it as the Dragon of Mars. And its soft influence may have been the true origin of the belief in a machine god, but very little else is known. Whatever the true cause of the Cult Mechanicum, by the time the Great Crusade was launched, the Emperor fully intended to make use of it. He descended to the surface of Mars in a great golden vessel, and such was his vast knowledge of science that a large part of the Mechanicum declared that he was the Omnissiah, the physical avatar of the machine god. In exchange for technology from ancient Terra and the chance to rediscover the lost strands of humanity's knowledge, the Mechanicum allied itself to the Imperium. Two empires joined in a common cause, and the forges of Mars bent themselves to the production of the material of war required by the Great Crusade. As the Crusade pushed outwards, many of the long-lost forgeworlds were rediscovered, sovereign empires that bent the knee to holy Mars, sharing some of their closely guarded knowledge, and sometimes bitterly, sometimes after conflict, adapting their version of the Cult Mechanicus to the common Martian orthodoxy. But divisions within this growing Mechanicum were only exacerbated by the Horus Heresy. There were tech priests who saw the joining of these two empires as detrimental to Mars, the older brother, the Emperor a usurper posing as the Omnissiah, particularly after he declared some forms of knowledge off limits, like the study of devices imbued with the power of the warp. During the Horus Heresy, the Mechanicum split in two factions, plunging Mars into civil war. The Forgeworlds and tech priests that sided with the War Master, including the Fabricator General of Mars itself, Kelbor Hal, opened the vaults of Moravec and started researching the creation of demon engines, eventually becoming what would be known as the True Mechanicus or Dark Mechanicus. And after the heresy, they were driven from Mars, whereas the Loyalist forces, who held that the Emperor was the Omnissiah, became the inheritors of the Red Planet, renamed the Adeptus Mechanicus in the great reorganization of the Imperium in the wake of the heresy. As the Adeptus Mechanicus, the institution became closer to the Imperium as a whole, integrated further into everyday imperial life, but also retained some of its age-old independence. The Adeptus Mechanicus is still an empire in its own right, following its own Byzantine and hierarchical systems of government and advancement, and its own separate systems of laws. At the largest scale, the priesthood of Mars is split down along the lines of the Forgeworlds, of which Mars is the first, greatest and most well known. The red planet, once terraformed to greenery, is now a dust bowl of red sand once again, an irradiated wasteland studded with ancient forge complexes and the rusting relics of earlier generations. Surrounded by a ring of iron comprised of some of the highest capacity void docks in the galaxy, and boasting some of the most majestic and ancient forge shrines, Mars is the holiest planet of the Cult Mechanicus, and a place of pilgrimage for worshippers of the machine god. It holds many smaller moons, stations and outposts under its control, and nominally all other forge worlds pay it fealty, but in reality all forge worlds are sovereign planets left to run their own affairs, provided they follow the broad religious dogma of the Cult Mechanicus as prescribed by Holy Mars, and abide by their treaty with the Imperium. Forge worlds are, every one of them, colossal manufacturing hubs, grim and polluted planets, their atmospheres and ecosystems ruined by millennia of industry, their production lines devouring the raw materials of nearby sectors. Their surfaces are often covered with layers upon layers of manufactorums who produce the ships, arms, equipment and industrial requirements of the Imperium, their orbits crammed with lifter arrays or void docks, and their surface teeming with billions of menials and servitors augmented and monotasks for their role, fueled by nutrient paste and the holy motive force. Though they're the domains of the Mechanicus alone, a Forgeworld is a linchpin of wider Imperial strategy, and wars are frequently fought in their defense. The Imperium are well aware that the loss of a Forgeworld would hamper their war fronts across hundreds of sectors. Each of these is ruled over by a council of its most senior tech priests, though tech priests is a very broad term, covering any initiated member of the cult. The priesthood itself is divided into a bewildering number of ranks and sub-ranks, honorifics and titles, but the higher-ranking members of the machine cult tend to adopt the title of Magos. A Magos is a proven expert in their field, a tech priest with decades or even centuries of experience and standing, whose prominence and prior discoveries might have resulted in command of one of the many forge complexes that cover the surface of their forge world. Magos are often identified further by their area of expertise. Magos biologists and genitors specialize in augmentation and genetics. Magos dominus in the command of armies, for example. These ancient magi are often massively augmented. The flesh is weak, and the perfection of the machine leads many tech priests towards extensive cybernetic augmentation and modification. Since it's invariably the tech priests themselves who perform these surgeries, it's likely that each individual's suite of enhancements is somewhat unique, and higher-ranking magi have a colossal variation in appearance. From cybernetic, faceless machine men adorned with optics, breathing apparatus, and flailing mechadendrites, to the subtler augmentations preferred by genitors or Magos biologists, to strange arrangements of spider-like limbs or floating brains in jars. It's inevitable that a tech priest will replace and enhance more and more of themselves throughout their career, and with the unnatural lifespan afforded by such augmentation, particularly ancient priests are often more machine than flesh. The most senior magi of a Forge world might adopt the title Archmagos, and the most senior might be elected Fabricator General. In theory, the most technically adept and knowledgeable of the assembled peers, or at least the one most of them can agree to nominally serve under, and the Fabricator General leads the Forge world with the assistance of a Fabricator Locum, but in reality, each Magos is the master of their own forge complex, within which their word is law. The organisation of the Mechanicus is that of academic peers, each free to make their own alliances or swear fealty to others as they see fit, each jealously guarding their own research standing and scraps of ancient knowledge from their colleagues, which can result in endless politicking and backstabbing, especially within the higher ranks of the organisation. Below the exalted magi are the many thousands of lower-ranked tech priests, still ordained adepts of the Cult Mechanicus, but just lesser in standing. These lex mechanics, engine seers, data smiths, rune priests, and manipuli may be bound to the service of a particular forge or magos by oaths of fealty, or may be free to sell their services to the highest bidder in return for materials or knowledge. But even those are too few to comprise the workforce of the forges. Beneath the adepts of the Cult Mechanicus are the lay population of the Forge worlds, the many billions of menials and workers that toil in the factories and forges. These may be indigent populations raised on the Forge worlds, people who have only known the rule of the Mechanicus, or indentured workers brought in from off-planet and attracted by payment, or they might simply be servitors, mind-wiped or vat-grown humans, monotasked, augmented and programmed to do whatever is required by their masters. Servitors are incredibly common throughout the Imperium, slaved to menial systems so that a wholly human brain, even a stunted and lobotomized one, still does any thinking required by humanity's technology. On the Forge worlds, servitors might operate in work gangs thousands strong, their mechanical components considered infinitely more valuable than the easily replaceable meat that they are housed in. And alongside them, some magi still employ the robots of the Cybernetica, though since abominable intelligence is the worst of heresies, the robots of the 41st millennium process their simple commands through a shred of biological tissue, wafers of human brain matter doing the actual thinking so as to keep them on the right side of the machine god. Though all these labour forces comprise the vast majority of the population of the Mechanicus' domain, their lives are totally at the mercy of their tech priest masters, just another resource for the Forge's magi to spend as they wish in order to acquire raw materials or bring glory to their rulers. How one actually progresses from one of these states to the other is unclear. There are probably as many stories as there are tech priests, and many dead ends a promising candidate might find themselves in, but one thing the Mechanicus has always been is ruthlessly, dangerously meritocratic. The only true currency is knowledge, and a low-ranking adept who shows promise might be promoted to be of better use to their master, or might claw their way up to the top through a rare discovery or flash of insight and an awful lot of self-modification. The most holy grail of the tech priesthood is the rediscovery of ancient knowledge, and so the privilege to work on such a thing, or the chance to make a discovery, makes the Adeptus Mechanicus a ruthlessly competitive forum. Some Magos eschew the intrigues and power grabs of the Forgeworlds altogether, striking out as a Magos Explorator, transporting the resources of their forge and their legions of followers into orbit to continue the real quest for knowledge across the galaxy, hoping to discover some long-lost information, maybe even the smallest fragment of an STC database. The sponsors and backers of such expeditions could easily be enriched by its findings, and so reliable information leads to great explorator fleets being assembled. Magi and tech priests pledge their service and the services of their underlings. A particularly promising find might even result in the dispatch of one of the Arx Mechanicus, ancient ships from before the fall of the Age of Strife, and bristling with barely understood weapons. The Adeptus Mechanicus, as an organisation, claim the right to secure the fruits of mankind's pre-strife civilization by any means necessary, and the slimmest thread of information on the whereabouts of an STC might lead to countless worlds invaded and razed, their populations subjugated or turned into servitors as the various tech priests and forgeworlds attempt to secure the knowledge for themselves. The war machine of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the soldiers that prosecute the conquests of the Explorator fleets or defend the forgeworlds, are varied beyond comprehension, assembled and modified to the whims of their masters. The armies of the Mechanicus make use of ancient and weird technology, too archaic and difficult to maintain for any other Imperial force, or too dangerous for any soldier to use other than the most augmented. Each forge might contain its own secret patterns of lost archaeotech weapons, but some accepted patterns have become popular the length and breadth of the Imperium. The most commonly seen Mechanicum soldiery in the 41st millennium are the Skitarii. Originally unique to Mars itself, the secrets of the construction of Skitarii have spread such that most Forge worlds can now call on their own legions. The Skitarii are human soldiers, drawn from the most fanatical and dedicated of the masses, and augmented for combat. Their pallid bodies are enhanced with bionic musculature and servo motors, particularly their lower limbs, which are replaced with far more efficient legs, originally to allow them to march in their columns across the vast red deserts of Mars. Their brains are enhanced just as much, each Skitarius aware of their place within the order of battle and able to communicate developments and orders from their primuses and alphas far faster than unaugmented soldiers. Their sensory inputs and breathing apparatus are replaced with more versatile technologies, and they carry weapons that would be lethal to regular soldiers not adapted to deal with their radiation load. Skitarii are further adapted to particular roles, wired into ancient walkers or as the crew of vehicles, or modified into infiltrators and saboteurs. They're still a force of thinking humans, just one attuned and fanatically loyal to the particular needs of the Mechanicus. They march to war alongside the battle robots of the Legio Cybernetica, the few sacred and hallowed relic patterns that still survive since the days of the heresy, or the fanatical electro-priests who dedicate themselves to the machine gods aspect as the motive force, and whose bodies swim with electrical energy, and all of these armies are accompanied by swarms of battle servitors, their flesh balked by stimulants, their nerves dulled, and their limbs replaced by heavy weapons. But the Adeptus Mechanicus also houses within its organisation whole martial sub-organisations dedicated to warfare. The Centurio Ordinatus is responsible for the development and maintenance of the Ordinatus engines, colossal and near-unique weapons platforms carrying rare technologies, sonic disruptors, macro cannon batteries, or ancient missile systems that can level cities. The Mechanicus houses within it many allied knight houses, some even based on the Forgeworlds, and some that, upon rediscovery, were persuaded to ally with the Mechanicus for security and regular maintenance. The Ordo Reducta are a suborder of tech priests who worship the machine god in his most destructive aspect. They're divisions of artillery deployed to topple enemy fortifications, but the most famous martial sub-organisation of the Mechanicus is the Divisio Titanica, the Titan Legions, whose god engines are living icons of the machine gods. Their manifolds, barely understood symbioses of man and machine, and their arms bristling with ancient weapons. But while the armies of the Mechanicus might be the most potent symbol of the old Empire of Mars and the power of the machine god, their jurisdiction does not stop at weapons of war. Though forgeworlds exist throughout the galaxy and explorator fleets push the quest for knowledge into newly discovered regions, the priesthood also has a presence on every Imperial world, in every Imperial city. The red-robed members of the Mechanicus are a relatively common sight throughout the Imperium as they minister to every sort of machine in common usage. Many Imperial organisations have dealings with the Adeptus, whose forges are as likely to produce ploughshares and purification plants as they are weapons and tanks. Bound by ancient pacts and oaths, tech priests serve in every other department of the Imperium, tending to the reactors at the heart of starships, maintaining and repairing the vehicles of the Imperial armies, or testing the populations of newly discovered worlds for genetic compliance. If there's a need for technical or scientific knowledge, you'll find tech priests. In civilian life, many manufactories and artisans are licensed by the local Mechanicus, subject to regular checks to ensure that the goods they produce conform to the orthodox and approved designs. The Adeptus Mechanicus is still fundamentally dedicated to knowledge, and learned tech priests may serve local rulers as advisors, experts in local flora and fauna, or in maximising industrial capital, or in the best methods of agricultural production. On many Imperial worlds, Mechanicus shrines are relatively common, especially in larger settlements, and the local population of tech priests may even maintain their own enclaves, networks of sovereign forges where only the laws of the Mechanicus apply. Still, they're rarely totally trusted by the regular civilians of the Imperium. Tech priests can be unnerving to unaugmented humans, who often see them as horrific and faceless machine men speaking in bursts of harsh binary code, reeking of unguents and sacred oils, and following a strange and unfamiliar religion. Even the more human of the Cult Mechanicus are often ridiculed behind their backs, Imperial citizens referring to them by a host of unique insults, though the same citizens tend to be careful not to show their distaste too publicly for fear of crossing some ancient code of religious law and ending up as a servitor. The Adeptus Mechanicus occupy a weird place in the hierarchy of the Imperium. The vast majority of human civilization is totally dependent on their carefully guarded knowledge, their husbanding of Dark Age technology allowing the Imperium to endure for 10 millennia, providing it with a stable and reliable tech base across worlds whose own civilizations might vary massively in their level of sophistication. In fact, their hidebound and dogmatic religious approach has enabled the Imperium to maintain many of these technologies unchanged without falling into the same traps their ancestors once did. After over 15,000 years, the Imperium continues to be wary of horrors like the Silica Animus. However, like everything within the Imperium, this security comes at a massive cost. Genuine advancement in the Imperium is almost non-existent. The Mechanicus' pathological distrust of innovation means that technological advancements that could have saved millions, shortened wars, or helped worlds are routinely blocked, restricted, or declared heresy by conclaves of tech priests who are merely jealous of the possibility that someone else might gain prominence where they don't. Even the smallest, most holy changes and discoveries must be backed by the evidence of their pre-existence elsewhere, and then debated by conclaves of priests for decades before being declared acceptable. And minor theological differences have led to schisms in the past, entire forgeworlds cutting off ties with their rivals, or being declared heretic. And at a smaller level than that, tech priests themselves are frequently hypocritical, their piety a cover for their desire for personal power. Rare is the tech priest who doesn't have some dubious project secreted within the depths of their private forge complex, some unorthodox research that could easily see them branded heretic were it ever to be made known to their peers, all while they themselves happily accuse their rivals of the same tech heresy for their own personal advancement. Wars have been started over less, the tech magi all too willing to expend the lives of their minions to gain prestige over a rival. In fact, despite their veneration of only human knowledge, the Adeptus Mechanicus has even less regard for regular humans than the rest of the Imperium does. Unaugmented humans are worthless to the tech magi, just resources to be expended, their lives infinitely less important or valuable than the lowliest holy machine. The Adeptus Mechanicus are very 40k. Absurdly advanced but incredibly conservative, completely reliant on advanced tech but also terrified of it. A reactionary response to the advances of the Dark Age of technology turned into a dogmatic religion so that no one questions it. And it's possible just something vaguely instigated by the Emperor, just in case it was ever necessary, twisted into a religion and then validated anyway because he was in a rush. Body horror, tech fetishism, and a satire on the conservatism and hypocrisy of religion all rolled into one, with added giant stompy robots. It truly is the most metal of 40k. Thanks for watching.